think so.
Ooh.
I'm disappointed I didn't get more of that preamble on tape, but I'm sure we'll repeat our points in due course.
Don't worry, we'll mention Videodrome again.
Oh boy.
Oh, boy.
That movie's only like 87 minutes long, and I'm terrified of what is held inside those 87 minutes.
The most sinister things are 87 minutes.
That's not
regardless.
True. All right.
We're back, guys. This is a so-called hack fraud show.
Ooh, indeed it is. Finally returning to vaguely American films, at least films made on this continent.
Yes. Everyone has American accents and so on and so forth.
Yes. We are kicking off a month of spooks, scares, thrills, grotesquerie, and whatever else we can throw at you with...
It is Spooktober on the Hack Fraud Show.
Hooray! Question mark?
I already shit myself.
Good lord.
We're off to a good start then.
Oh boy.
No, we're not.
Reed has some thoughts. So this week we decided to take a look at the work of Mr. David Cronenberg to kind of ease us, well, not ease us, as it turns out, just dive wholeheartedly into this month.
Noted body horror auteur, Cronenberg.
Oh, yes. And Cronenberg has had a very interesting career because he's moved through a few different kind of modes of filmmaking.
And he's still active.
He is still active. I'm not sure what his last released movie was. It might have been
Was it 2014?
I'm not sure. I think he made that movie called A Dangerous Method, which I'm not sure when that came out.
To the internet.
2011. Okay, that might have been the last movie he made.
Yeah. But yeah, he's pretty much just been around as film has changed around him.
Yes.
Maybe it has changed him.
His first film came out in 1969, and his last film did come out in 2014. It was Maps to the Stars, which I have heard about. But anyway.
Interesting. So
he is someone who is known for a very distinct sensibility. Many.
I'd argue there are very few filmmakers who are known for more peculiar and distinctive things.
Yeah. I assume many people know him from that episode of Rick and Morty where the whole world turns into like Cronenberg monsters.
Oh, we really Cronenberged it up, though, Morty. and then I think it's in the beginning of episode 3. Oh, this is really nice fried Cronenberg.
Love that. Yep. So we will get into The Fly and Scanners here in due course, but before that, how about a little non-spooky? What have we been watching?
Well, what I've been watching is very unspooky. Let's see. Allow me to... Okay. The first thing I watched was a little something called 30 Rock.
So scary.
Utterly delightful.
Oh.
Utterly delightful. This is like there's also another, like, for this TV class, I watched like 2 NBC sitcoms, and both of them were absolutely delightful. So that's...
What was the other one?
What? Community.
Oh, I love Community.
Okay, but we'll start with 30 Rock. 30 Rock, this episode was about Alec Baldwin has to go to some, like, bigwig golf event for, like, all these NBC executives, and he wants to bring Tracy Morgan because one of the bigwigs really loves his movies. And what happens from there is that Tracy Morgan brings up the fact that there's not many black people there. And then he's told, like, you don't bring that up to the bigwigs. And he says, oh, I see. Am I here as a stereotype to amuse you? And then he starts doing a bunch of stereotypical things and genuinely leaving the white people for a lark.
Ooh.
Which is really fucking interesting.
I vaguely remember this episode. I think we've talked about this before. I watched the entirety of 30 Rock, but my memory of it is very scattershot, and I don't remember a lot of specific episodes.
Yeah, and there's also another subplot where somebody calls Tina Fey a cunt, and that's like a big subplot. Tina Fey tries to be, says, should I fire this person? Do I have to be nicer? And what can I say? It's all really well written, lots of great repertoire. It's full of a bunch of great comedic actors. Tina Fey can do no wrong.
I agree.
And also Alec Baldwin and Tracy Morgan are fucking hilarious. So.
Oh man, Tracy Morgan on that show is just one of the all-time great runs by any actor. I think
it's okay. She asked me to take it out, and then Tina Fey runs in like 10 minutes later. It's a false alarm. She asked him to take it out. The show is pure genius, and I need to watch more of
it. A pack of dogs once took over and successfully ran a Wendy's. One of my favorite.
That rant about the hood from Tracy Morgan is one of the greatest things that has ever been on network television. I seen a homeless man trying to cook a Hot Pocket on a Subway third rail.
Oh, I love it.
But the other delightful NBC sitcom I saw was an episode of Community.
Yes.
This one about conspiracies, where it's like one of the characters...
I watched this exact same episode with my friends 2 days ago. Oh my goodness.
What coincidence. Glorious. Okay,
Conspiracy.
So one of our esteemed characters tries to get out of taking a real class, so he just makes up a fake class called Conspiracies. And then in attempting to prove that this class exists, a Professorson shows up, and then our esteemed characters goes, I've never seen that person, this was a fake class. And then what happens is an action movie parody thriller about conspiracies and people double-crossing each other in hilarious gunplay fashion. There's also a delightful subplot about building blanket forts.
Yes.
Yes. You have to go through the Turkish district.
This episode quickly turns into the characters become embroiled in an ever-escalating kind of conspiracy that just spirals out of control, and it is hilarious.
It's fucking great, and the pillow fort subplot is one of my favorite things I've ever seen in a sitcom.
I will say this, they bring the blanket fort back for another episode later that's a spoof of Ken Burns documentaries, and it's amazing.
They said, this is the Latvian Pride Parade. Don't look at me, they signed the paperwork. And then, like, the moment they're like, it's become popular, it's become mainstream, they just instantly tear it down. We've started looting!
Community is incredible, and, you know, I've thought about this a lot lately, because that show was created by Dan Harmon, who, of course, went on to do Rick and Morty, and that show is just one of the most incredible, bizarre things to ever end up on network television, I think.
Yeah, I'm just so surprised, like, how did this... It's just so peculiar.
NBC was so, like, nakedly desperate for a hit around that time that they were willing to take anything that was even, like, vaguely popular and support it. If they had any bigger shows, like, Community would have been canceled after the first season.
Yeah, and, like, I'm so glad it stayed.
Yeah.
With both of these shows, I need to see more.
Oh, yes. Community is great. And this is actually something I've been thinking a lot about lately. I think part of the reason that the third season of Rick and Morty has been so audacious and brilliant is that Dan Harmon is
given a blank check.
Well, that and Dan Harmon is finally, like, back in a zone where he's, like, comfortable enough with the show to really start playing with storytelling form and structure in interesting ways. Because the third season of Community has a lot of, like, very interesting experimental episodes.
Interesting. Yeah, well, also, like, granted, all of, like, season 3 of Rick and Morty has been about, like, here's our world, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, the fucking, like, Citadel episode.
I love it.
But regardless, utterly delightful episodes of television.
Yes.
The other things I've been watching was Frederick Wiseman's High School. Which is kind of I think it was, like, 69 it was made, just Frederick Wiseman... went to a high school and just started filming people. And it's kind of about authoritarianism and how, like, the school... and this sort of disconnect between, like, what the schools say and what the behaviors reinforced by the schools are. Like, because people talk about freedom and democracy and things like history class and that sort of thing. But like anytime we see like an argument between a student and a teacher, there is no argument.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the teacher's right and you need just to obey.
Yeah.
That's where everything ends, and that's just kind of the student faculty relationship from day one.
Yeah. Well, this sounds like a more interesting, honest portrait of high school than I've ever seen depicted in mainstream film.
Yeah, it is really interesting, especially because like it has like this really interesting cinematic technique where they will fuck around with time, but they will like use sound and cutaways to make it seem like it's one continuous take
Mm-hmm.
and one continuous conversation, which is really interesting. And there's just also like how women are filmed in it is really fascinating. Because like they are just like we rarely see faces, we see like people leering at them.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just really interesting. I guess I don't have much more to say about it other than like it is a pretty interesting documentary and far more interesting than his 3-hour Ex Libris.
Well, that's good to hear.
That regardless, yeah, but if you want like just a really honest depiction of high school, which is scarily similar to the version we went to in the late 2000s and early
2010s.
teens.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I want to re-experience that, but good to know it's out there.
It is interesting.
All right.
So regardless, that's what of note I've been watching.
Dr. Reed, have you been watching anything of note? Really? No Baraka, no weird documentaries, no Bend It Like Beckham's to talk about this week?
No Vice? You didn't watch a single Vox video?
Oh, I watched a Vox video about
What?
the triplet flow in rap songs. That was interesting.
And I should like watch.
Watched that a little while back.
I should be like listening to and like watching Vox more often, but like for some reason, it kind of just falls. To the
I know that
priorities.
there is this staffer that works on the like. I'm just gonna call him Johnny Bravo. He's gonna do a bunch of video document, like 15 to 20-minute documentaries about borders, which he said he was going to do for the longest time, but now he's actually getting around to doing it. So I'll probably more than likely be watching it. So I will count those as things to watch.
That is what you'll be watching, rather
Yes.
than what you've been watching. Well, good to know.
Well, Tyler, are we ready for?
Okay.
Or do you want to start with something else?
I have a few things to talk about. Okay. I actually had a fairly successful week of watching. All right. So the other night, I finally had some time on my hands, and instead of watching another episode of Twin Peaks, I decided to watch Noah Baumbach's "Kicking and Screaming" from 1995.
I've never actually seen a Noah Baumbach picture.
I really don't think you would like most of them, but The Squid and the Whale is great, and I think you might actually like that one. That movie's just a masterpiece. That's definitely my favorite of his that I've seen. I really didn't like Frances Ha or Mistress America that much, and I really don't think you would like them either. This movie, though, I liked it a lot. I thought it was pretty good. The deal with it is, I think this was Baumbach's first movie, or his first feature film anyway, and it follows a small kind of friend group of like 22-year-olds who just graduated from college, and they are kind of postponing really starting real life. They all move into a house together, like not too far from their college, and one of them is dating another student who's still in college, and one of them, his girlfriend, goes to Prague for like kind of some kind of like study program. And they're all just kind of hanging out and just waiting to start their real lives and just not wanting to. And it's good, and it's very funny. I really was consistently laughing throughout the whole movie.
Okay.
It maybe is a little bit long in the tooth. It's not very long. It's like 96 minutes. Maybe it should have been like 86 minutes, but It's good,
Movies aren't
and
very long usually.
yeah, and also Eric Stoltz shows up in a great supporting role where he's playing this guy who, I don't know if he ever actually graduated. He still kind of hangs out around the college, and he's a bartender. And like you look at him and you're like, oh, this guy's kind of pathetic. But like as the movie goes on, you kind of realize more and more like, oh, this guy actually seems to have his shit together. Like maybe he's kind of the real hero of this piece.
Interesting. So it's kind of just like all about like people who like refuse to grow up.
It's not so much. I mean, it is that, but more than just refuse to grow up, they just refuse to kind of acknowledge that like their real life needs to start now.
Interesting.
And Elliot Gould, it plays one of their dads. He shows up for like 5 minutes. It's very fun. Anyway, it's on Netflix. Check it out if you're so inclined. But
if only my Netflix subscription had not run out.
Oh.
Whatever will I do?
Oh well. All right. I also saw a movie that was hotly anticipated among us, I know, and among my friend group here too as well. I saw Harry Dean Stanton in Lucky.
Oh shit!
I mean, the movie's like a B plus. His performance is an A plus. I mean, it's the perfect swan song. Literally, I mean, not to spoil anything, but this isn't a movie that you can really spoil. But like the end of this movie. Like, literally, he kind of just walks, like, through the desert, like, stops, like, literally, like, looks directly into camera, turns around, and just kind of walks off into the distance. Like, my friend described it, like, after it was over, he was like, well, we just kind of watched Harry Dean Stanton ascend into heaven, basically.
Yeah, that's... there are actors who would fucking kill for that kind of send-off.
Yeah. It's an excellent send-off. The movie is very low-key, kind of plotless, but it's fun. David Lynch actually shows up in a supporting role, playing a man who has lost his pet tortoise, which is great. Yeah, Harry Dean Stanton just gets so many great showcase moments, but it's not like he just dominates the movie at the expense of everyone else. It is very much, everyone kind of gets their time in the sun. But, you know, in the end, it really is Harry Dean Stanton's show, and he does a spectacular job.
Yeah, I'm still really excited.
Yeah.
To see it at some point.
Yeah, it's great, and I'm excited to see what director John Carroll Lynch does next. He's one of my favorite kind of on the fringes character actors, and
but
I'm excited to see where he goes with his filmmaking career. And then I also took the plunge and saw my first Terrence Malick film, which is 1973, I think? 1973's Badlands.
Oh, yeah, I've seen... This was his first film, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm. What'd you think?
Good. It is a very beautiful looking, very well crafted, well acted, well put together film. It was not my cup of tea at all.
That's about where I'm at.
I did not really enjoy watching this movie really at all.
Yeah, it's. I think for me I thought it was a bit of a slog too.
I mean, the movie looks incredible, and considering that it was made in the 70s on like basically no budget, like I'm very, very impressed. But I mean, like, so it's weird. Like Martin Sheen plays this kind of like 25-year-old like slacker kind of person in like this 50s town in South Dakota. He kind of gets involved with a 15-year-old girl played by Sissy Spacek. They kind of fall in love, or at least she thinks they fall in love, and then but her dad doesn't approve of them being together, so literally Martin Sheen kills her dad, and they go on the run. And man, the reason I say this movie is definitely like well put together is that like there's a lot of kind of teenage stupid bullshit in this movie.
Yes.
But the movie like recognizes that it's stupid teenage bullshit, and like it's filtered through the eyes of Sissy Spacek's character, and she really believes in this stuff, so that all works.
There's something very dreamlike about it all.
Yeah. But Martin Sheen in this movie, though, is just a fucking sociopath, and I did not enjoy being in his company for the course of this film.
Yeah, it is. The thing about like these kind of movies is that like you should at least be able to understand the allure of these people. And in this, it's just pretty much a woman is held hostage and taken through South Dakota.
Yeah,
that's pretty much the plot of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, there is the element like she still like kind of thinks she's in love with him, and then it just gets, I don't know.
All the interesting stuff's in her, and her just sort of like, how do I, and her just sort of filtering the world.
Right. And even though like she narrates the film, you really don't get to spend like too much time in her head, which is a problem, I think.
No, well, granted, I think there's also kind of the thing of just like she's kind of shallow too. So yeah, it's an interesting movie.
It's interesting. Again, just gorgeous to look at. I'm gonna see more of Malick eventually because I don't
think we'll ever be able to fully escape Tree of Life.
Eventually, I'm gonna have to see that. I watched like 20 minutes of that when I was, I think, maybe a sophomore in high school and was like, what is this? I don't know. I don't get it. And turned it off. So I'm going to have to go back to that eventually.
Oh, goodness. It is. Malick's Malick.
Yeah. I will see more of his films. I don't know. I mean, he's done a lot of like, you know, different kinds of movies. So I'm interested to see what else he's worked on. And, you know, I'll delve into it more. Badlands really was not my cup of tea.
Yeah. Malick is notable in the fact that he's kind of able to do whatever the fuck he wants at this point.
Which is kind of strange.
Yeah, which is kind of strange, and I'm kind of glad that's the case. That like someone with such a particular vision and particular style is able just to do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
That like the fact that like the Tree of Life can exist.
Yeah. I mean, this man just made Song to Song, which is a movie that, like, no one would sign off on if anyone else tried to make it, I think. But, so that's Badlands. But I also, this week, ventured out to my local multiplex to see Kingsman, The Golden Circle.
I want to start this out with a question.
Sure.
Why did you and your friends go out and see Kingsman, The Golden Circle?
Most of my friends liked the first Kingsman. Okay. I thought the first Kingsman was really just okay, and there were various elements of it that really bothered me.
I've never seen it, to be honest.
It's fine. It's not that great. I mean, it's whatever. I mean, all right, I say I like Matthew Vaughn. I mean, I haven't seen Layer Cake, but I really enjoy X-Men First Class.
Mm-hmm.
Kick-Ass...
Matthew Vaughn is a very particular style.
Kick-Ass is not a good movie.
I haven't seen Kick-Ass either.
Kick-Ass is not good. And the first Kingsman I really thought was, like, fine, whatever. And, but, you know, Kingsman 2 came out, the reviews were really not so hot, my friends still wanted to see it. I was kind of like, I guess I'll go... Like, I was curious, and, you know, I can be surprised by anything. You know, anything can surprise you.
A good movie can come from anywhere. That's
you know, I really enjoy X-Men Apocalypse. Like, good stuff can come, you know, from unexpected places sometimes. And I kind of thought I might not like it, but I was kind of like, I'll just see it, and, you know, that'll be the end of that. And I probably won't like it, but it might be a fun time.
Yeah.
This movie's horrible. Like, it's horrendous. I am not exaggerating at all. I am not exaggerating at all to say that this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It is horrible. Like, you know, I'm gonna try. For those of you who are concerned that I'm just a total sociopath after, like, finding Mother to be a very amusing movie, this movie shook me to my core. Like, this movie is so... I thought I'd lost my ability to be shocked and appalled. I was shocked and appalled by this movie. It is so needlessly grotesque. There is a scene in this movie Julianne Moore plays the villain in this movie. There's a scene where she makes like one of her henchmen shove another henchman into a meat grinder. The man is like sliced into like kind of raw, like ground beef looking meat. She takes the meat, makes it into like a little hamburger patty, and makes the other henchman eat it. Yeah. That's in this fucking movie.
That is unique.
That is, and the first movie, I mean, like, it's weird because the deal with these movies is that, like, they are, like, hard R, very violent, like, spoofs of, like, the Bond films. But,
and, like, the final image in the first one is anal sex.
Yeah, but, like, they're, like, these... It's like the Roger Moore, like, mode of Bond, where it's, like, very goofy, and they have a lot of, like, weird gadgets and stuff. And
There's
it's,
also
like...
something very infantile about them.
Okay, well, that's the other thing, is that this movie is so fucking obnoxious. There is just an air of douchiness that hangs over this entire film, and it is awful. And like the way this movie treats female characters is truly, truly appalling. There are like 4 main female characters in this movie. One of them dies within the first half hour, does nothing in the film. She's just gone. Julianne Moore plays the villain, doesn't really do anything. There's also a part of the movie where she, like, hangs out in, like, a 1950s style kitchen and wears an apron. And it's just not good. And then the third major female character is the main character's love interest, who, you know, was the subject of that anal sex joke in the first movie.
Yeah.
She has no agency at all. She is just like a kind of, not nagging girlfriend. She's just such a one-note stereotype. It's awful. And then the fourth character is Halle Berry, who plays this, like, you know, kind of the Q type person in the American, like, spy agency called Statesman that is introduced in this movie. She is, like, kind of allowed to, like, join the main team and be a field agent at the end of the movie.
Oh, a real person.
Yeah, but she gets there by having a committee of all men vote her in. So what does that say? I don't know. This fucking movie. And just the action scenes are terrible. The standout sequence, I think most people agree, of the first movie was that big action scene in, like, the Westboro Baptist Church where Colin Firth, like, kills everybody. That scene I actually do think is pretty good. All the action scenes in this movie are trying to be on that level, and it's terrible, and they look terrible. Like, they look so fake. It's awful, and they just look like ass.
Can I just say this? Like, it just seems that, like, we have just reached a point where we've just kind of accepted that CGI is just going to always look like shit in these action films.
But that's not true!
I don't know, but, like, I see so much bad CGI in every fucking movie I see in a theater now.
It is possible to make CGI look good and to use it well, and this movie does not, and it's so bad. The CGI in this movie looks horrible. And, oh my god, this movie is so long. It's 2 hours and 20 goddamn minutes. It's stretched so fucking thin. It's truly, truly awful. Like, I didn't want to hate this movie. I was truly shocked by how bad it was. And it's awful. I cannot recommend this movie to anyone.
Me, but I'm almost curious now.
I mean,
I am too. Even though
it sounds uniquely bad.
Maybe, like, every aspiring writer should see it as an example of how completely not to write female characters. Like, I'm like, I forgot about the other fucking thing in this movie. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry, but
rant. It's fine. This is what people come in for.
The other female character in this movie is just completely a sex object. There's the thing in this, God. So what happens is Taron Egerton, who's the main character in this movie, he has to, like, plant a tracking device on this woman for some fucking reason. I can't even remember. But, of course, you know, because of course, he has to implant the tracker through her vagina. Like, I'm sorry to be blunt, but that is in this movie. And, you know, he's in a committed relationship. So, you know, of course he has to have sex with another girl to implant this tracker in her to complete the mission. But of course, because he's such a nice guy, he can't really go through with it. So he, like, FaceTimes his girlfriend and is like, hey, I have to sleep with this other girl to, like, finish the mission. And she gets all mad at him. But and then is like, it's like, and they have to, like, the relationship drama takes up an inordinate amount of time in this movie. It's so awful. And then, yeah, he, like, goes to, you know, implant the tracker in this other girl, which he does by, like, you know, giving her a hand job, but then he can't actually go through with the act because he's such a nice guy.
Wow.
It's horrible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fuck.
So, yeah, that's Kingsman, The Golden Circle. I will say this, though. There is exactly one good thing in this movie. And that thing is, God bless him, Sir Elton John in an extended cameo. Like, he is held captive by Julianne Moore and, like, forced to perform for her, which he does in those, like, wildly extravagant, like, colorful feather outfits that he used to wear in the 70s. Like, every other word he says is fuck. There's a part where, Colin Firth is about to be, like, killed by, one of her, like, robotic minions, and Elton John just jumps in front of him, and Rocket Man comes up on the soundtrack. All that stuff is delightful. Wait for someone to post that in a supercut on YouTube. Don't see the rest of the movie.
That's all you need.
So,
Does Elton John die at that point when he...
no, Elton John survives the movie.
Yeah.
And gets to make an anal sex joke, because Elton John is gay, kids. Yeah.
God,
So
I'm getting angry just listening to you describe this.
So my forward review of this movie is God bless Elton John. And that's all I have to say.
I think that's all we need. Good
Yeah.
God, that sounds goddamn awful.
Horrible.
That, you're right. That does sound shocking and appalling.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yep. So there you go. I will not be seeing the next one.
Has it made enough to warrant the next? Or, like, how is this done?
I don't know. I heard the third one is already in development. So, you know, there you go. But let's talk about David Cronenberg now, shall we?
Let's talk about good filmmakers.
Oh, let's talk about movies that are grotesque and repulsive on purpose.
All right, kids. Where do we want to start first?
Let's just get to ultimate body horror of the episode.
Let's dive into 1986's The Fly.
The fucking Fly.
I'm going to say this right from the get-go. This movie's kind of delightful.
I kind of love it.
There is a layer of dark comedy throughout the movie that really makes it entertaining.
Yeah. It's weird. It is extremely grotesque, and, like, the end of the movie is...
Some of the imagery is shocking.
Some of the imagery is shocking, some of it is horrifying.
It's very Kafka-esque, and the storytelling in this piece is actually quite nice. But the body...
There is kind of, like, metamorphosis-esque about it, especially, like, in the explicit way that, like, a man is turned into an insect.
Yeah, except a lot slower than just waking up. And a lot more grotesque as opposed to, like, a cute pill bug or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about, like, Kafka is surreal and kind of funny. Cronenberg is funny and kind of horrifying.
Cronenberg seems to have a weird thing with insects, because he also made the movie Naked Lunch, which, as I understand it, features giant talking insects. So...
which also sounds delightful.
Yeah. Anyway.
The plot of the movie...
Yeah.
It concerns Jeff Goldblum, eccentric inventor extraordinaire who brings back is a magazine journalist.
Yeah, so this movie
Science magazine.
This movie wastes absolutely no time. It starts with
why I like it.
Jeff Goldblum meeting Gina Davis, playing, he's like Science Magazine reporter. I think Particle Magazine is the name of the magazine. He says, "Hey, I'm working on something that's going to change the world. Come back to my lab and I'll show you." They go back to his lab. He shows her his teleportation pods.
Yep.
This movie's so packed with like great little details. Like one that I love is that like the reason Jeff Goldblum builds these things is that like he gets sick riding any form of like wheel-based transportation.
And I love the idea is like, it's not too hard. I just tell them to make me something. They send it here. I put it all together. It's really like Legos.
Yeah. So he's working on these teleportation pods. He convinces her like not to write a story about this because he's paranoid about the news getting out.
And wants it to be like he kind of has a thing for spectacle. He kind of wants that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if any other actor were doing this material, it would be creepy. But like Goldblum manages to make this character like so charming and kind of endearing.
Yeah, this is one of the great Goldblum performances for a reason. He's funny, he's charming, but he still is really nebbishy and kind of awkward too. It's a really great mix.
Yeah, he walks the line like very, very well in this movie. So you probably know the broad outline of the story of this movie, even if you haven't seen it.
The movie's called The Fucking Fly.
Yeah. So he and Gina Davis like start a relationship, and then he gets jealous and he decides to test the pods on himself. A fly flies into the pod that he's in, and they're transported together, and they begin to merge in a very grotesque and kind of amusing, kind of horrifying way.
Creating Brundlefly.
Brundlefly, yes. Because Goldblum's name of the movie is Seth Brundle.
Yeah. And there's something to say, like, and this is something we'll get back to with Scanners, like, once, like, the movie has really no interest in the teleportation stuff and kind of like the science fiction stuff. It's kind of all about a man dealing with his own grotesque mutation.
Yeah, well...
and, like, how people around him react to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, the kind of immediate effect of it all is, like, he comes out of the pod and, like, immediately has, like, an increased, like, sex drive and, like...
Yeah, he's, like, increased metabolism, like, he's much stronger now.
Yeah, his reflexes have increased. It's almost like the Spider-Man kind of origin story at first.
Yeah, you're right. There's a bit of that in there.
And then it very quickly goes in a different direction.
Yeah, as he starts to mutate into a hybrid fly in a very horrifying and... there's lots of cancer imagery. Enough for it. Yeah,
I think kind of Cronenberg has said that, like, this movie was kind of intended to, like, be just kind of a metaphor for, like, disease and cancer and, like, the aging process also.
And, like, how people around you react to that.
Yeah.
And there's the moment is kind of jumping forward. There's kind of the moment at the end where he says, like, where, like, he gets the journalist pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously she wants to have an abortion because of, after like a horrifying dream sequence.
Oof.
And then he says like, well, don't do that. Don't kill Brundle. Don't kill me because I'm going to be gone after all this.
Yeah. I think in addition to the scene of him like ripping off his fingernails, that scene of like the dream sequence was probably the most the one where I most like recoiled from my TV screen in horror.
I just kind of like put down the screen and it's like, what's on my phone right now?
Yeah,
that's all horrifying, Reed. I get it, but all of it's done with such like a blunt, dark humor that it's kind of delightful too. And Jeff Goldblum is having a lot of fun, like the scene where it's like, all right, kids, you see, like my teeth are kind of worthless, so I have to like melt down my food. And he makes like a film like demonstration of his mutation.
That scene where he's like, "This would make a great children's book." I'm like,
and that's fucking hilarious.
Yeah. There's a lot to like in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just... Oh, shit, what was I going to say? Oh, you texted me something that I think was, like, very apt, where you're like, Cronenberg seems, like, as interested in how people, like, react to these mutations as the mutations themselves.
Because, like, these kind of filmmakers it's kind of really easy to get marketed like, oh, the makeup and like the
Yeah.
makeup and the deformity and the horror, la-di-la-di-la. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it's about how Jeff Goldblum and the journalist and the creepy ex-lover deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cronenberg never forgets the human element in this movie, which is
I
really...
think that's why he's one of the greats.
Which is, what makes this movie really, I think, really quite excellent.
But on that note, the makeup's fucking incredible.
The makeup is so fantastic in this movie.
When you look up this movie online, you hear people saying like "Fly remake." I'm like, "Fuck you!" It'll never look better than this.
Yeah, I am a sucker for old school practical makeup effects. They're used to great effect in another one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, John Carpenter's The Thing, and there's just such a personal handmade grotesquerie that you can get with those effects that CGI just can't touch.
Yeah, well, like I don't think it's going to be a very long time until we get to the point where like it's going to look like there's a real fucking light on it. It's going to look like a man's skin's falling off. It's not something generated. It's something we actually constructed.
Yeah,
and people actually like people made with wax and paint. There's something just like you're right. There's like a handmade quality to it.
All right, but we've been talking a lot. Reed, I know you were kind of
repulsed,
in a different mind on this movie, so I'll give you the floor here.
Okay, thanks. Well, so first red flag. If you go to a science convention and you find someone that says this is the thing that changes the world, 9 times out of 10 they're full of shit. That one time, they turn into a fly, and, which is what happens in this movie. So,
Reed, I will agree with you. The baboon being turned inside out is absolutely pointless.
I don't know if it's pointless. It is kind of the first sign of, like, how grotesque this movie is gonna get.
Yeah.
I had to pause the movie, walk up and say,
when that moment came up, I just looked at my phone, and instead of like a flurry of messages, it just said 7 messages from Reed. And they consisted. Are you going to read them, Tyler?
I think I did like read them earlier. What did Reed say? Yep. Fuck you, Cronenberg. What did baboons ever do to you?
But then later in the movie, they make dark jokes about it.
Oh, can I just say this? Can I just say this real quick?
Works. Yeah, go ahead.
There's an infamous cut scene from this movie where he like tries to merge the second baboon and a cat, I think, and like is forced to kill it or something. Apparently, like, test audiences reacted, like, so violently negatively to that scene.
Yeah, I kind of wonder why. Because if they
that's far even for this movie.
Baboon gets slaughtered, how do you think they're gonna react to that?
Yeah, I'm kind of glad they cut that. But sorry, continue, Dr. Reed.
Yeah. So, and then this movie goes on, and then we see the ultimate moment where he's like, "Oh shit!" that he's going to be merged with a fly, and he's going to turn into this fly humanoid demon thing. Which I'm like, about like a halfway point, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And like throughout all of this is pretty good storytelling. You have a good relationship dynamic setup, especially between the inventor and the journalist, and then the creep and
that guy
who turns into the hero. That
guy is one of the all-time great like movie creeps. Like I don't know what else he's been in, but
he is so interesting.
He was in and then that scene, the live birth maggot.
Oh boy.
Oh fuck. And then like so then again, I really liked the devolution of this fly man being turn into like a pussy form of Jack Nicholson. a pussy-infected form of Jack Nicholson. What really gets me is that everything molds to actually turn into an actual fly, and then I'm like, oh, why couldn't they just have kept that? Oh,
like the horrifying scene at the end where like he starts falling apart and turning into the fly.
I do kind of love that scene. I mean, just that's the full just explosion moment for the makeup effects.
No.
And like his like entire face just like peels away, and like the fly head comes. Oh my god! I was like, whoa!
I was like, holy fuck, how did they do that? It's just kind of like, what the fuck did they do to get this?
Yeah, I was combined awestruck at the effects, like, chuckling with, like, oh my god, this is awesome filmmaking, and, like, just hands over my mouth in horror, like, all three at once.
It's disgusting. It feels like a man's falling apart.
Yeah. I think I made a mention, let me see. I said, I don't know if I can watch movies after that.
Don't worry, Reed. All the movies you're going to be watching after this are going to be less scary and worse. I guarantee that.
Probably. I mean, you guys make a good point. The makeup in this is badass.
It is some of the best makeup effects you're ever going to see. I can't quite think of something on the top of my head that's better.
Yeah,
I can't either.
Yeah. Granted, I've never seen The Thing, so
The Thing is great. The makeup effects in that are also really transcendent.
I need to see The Thing, but
yeah, this was probably the scariest movie I ever saw.
It's up there for me.
There you. I don't know. I think I've seen more unpleasant things. Obviously, I think.
Well, okay. I mean, Mike Leigh's naked is more disturbing on a visceral, psychological level.
That's what I mean.
But
I guess as far as I don't know. I think I was just sort of like drawn in by the dark comedy of it all.
Yeah.
I can't say I was ever like I was disgusted by it, but I can't say I was ever quite scared by it either. Which isn't really a bad thing, because either way, I was having a delightful time.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It's less scary and more just kind of like gross out, like it's body horror.
Some of the gross out stuff is intense.
It is.
Yeah.
But
I think.
I said, but I mean, even Reed, you even admitted, like, in spite of everything, like, it is a very well crafted movie.
Yeah. I think where we're ending on is that Tyler and I both adore it, and Reed is just kind of repulsed by it, but admires what it is.
Yeah, and it had that like that like nice storytelling vibe that I'd say Logan had with a similar amount of repulsive. Well, nowhere near a similar amount for repulsiveness. I actually enjoyed Logan. But, I mean, I like this movie too. Like, it's nice to see an actual horror movie as opposed to the as opposed to the mini series It, which was laughing the whole time.
Yeah.
So
there you go. Yeah,
we like it.
We do like it. Somehow, this was like the most mainstreamly successful movie that Cronenberg has ever made. I mean,
I kind of get it. I mean, The Fly is weird, but it's still got, like, there's an arc to it. It's got, its characters aren't quite archetypes, but they're grounded in archetypes.
Yeah. And also, this was kind of a remake of, like, an earlier, kind of sci-fi horror, like, 50s B movie. Also, Gina Davis was, like, a pretty successful actress around this time, I think. I'm not sure.
Was Jeff Goldblum in anything big before this, or was this kind of his coming out?
Jeff Goldblum had been in. I don't know if this was. I don't think this was his breakout, because he'd been like kind of on the periphery of things for a while. I mean, he shows up in Robert Altman's Nashville, for crying out loud. Yeah. I also think he kind of had like a major role in The Big Chill, which I haven't seen. But so I don't think this was by any means his breakout, but I do think it kind of made him into a star in a way that hadn't been before. I mean, this would lead into him spending half of Jurassic Park with his shirt off. So, so there you go.
Are we ready for Scanners?
I am ready to talk about Scanners.
What did you think?
All right, so this is 1981, a slightly earlier phase of Cronenberg's career, when he was still kind of making these like lower budget kind of creepy horror sci-fi kind of things.
Yeah, there's something kind of B-movie about it.
This is very, very B-movie-ish.
Mhm.
All right, so this movie kind of centers around this concept of scanners, who are like people that can read minds and kind of do kind of basic kind of mind control stuff.
And make people's heads explode.
Yeah, which is a great kind of early grotesque moment in this movie.
That's kind of like the thing people get from scanners is the guy's head exploding.
Yeah.
That effect.
Yeah. So the movie kind of centers around like these two kind of main guys. One is like an evil kind of scanner who is kind of rallying an army to try and take over the world, I guess. And
yeah, but they're also kind of like this hive mind. They kind of connect with each other. One of the things I admire most, like, this movie doesn't feel the need to explain anything.
Oh, yeah.
But the movie just kind of throws you in with, like, one of the scanners and it kind of having issues and getting chased, and, like, it doesn't explain the hive mind. It just kind of shows you it.
Yeah. Well, this is part of that period before, like, every fucking character needed to have a backstory. Like, I was thinking about this as I was watching it. Like, that Kim character who comes in, like, about halfway through the movie, like, if this movie were made today, like, she would have some, like, big, long, tragic backstory about, like, being a scanner.
Like, this huge, like, flashback.
Yeah. But that's not in this movie, so that's fine.
Good.
Although, fun fact that I just found out, that was just announced this week, apparently this movie is being, they're trying to adapt it into a TV series.
Interesting.
Which could be good. I don't know.
I will say this: this movie kind of feels like if Cronenberg like read like an X-Men comic and said, "People's heads explode."
It does have that kind of X-Men-y feel to it a little bit,
especially with like Legion, where it's like there's this giant evil like governmental corporation.
Yeah, I liked this movie fine. I think it is a little.
I love elements of it.
Yeah, there are elements of it that are great. Like, everything kind of involving just the world building of the scanners, I think, is really interesting. I love
this great scene where like they all kind of like they first display the hive mind and they fuck around with sound design.
Yeah. Oh, the sound design and the score, really plays into like kind of the effects of this movie. And I love that scene where like he goes the good scanner whose name is it like Cameron or something?
Is it Cameron? Oh god, I can't remember.
I think it's Cameron. He goes to like find this kind of like resistance pocket of like the good scanners, and like they're all kind of living in a house together, and I like that stuff.
Yeah.
Part of the problem though is that like there are long, kind of really slow stretches of this movie where it's like a bunch of guys in a boardroom like talking about what's happening and why they want to get the scanners, and those parts are not so hot.
Down to this, I just don't care about the corporate espionage.
Yeah, I mean, I found it kind of interesting. The whole element with like the drug that, like, spoiler alert, ended up like creating the scanners, I think is that's all interesting. That doctor character, like, whenever he speaks, the movie kind of like grinds to a halt, I think.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, it is very much a B movie. Like, nothing's really explained. I'm not really sure. And this is another movie where, like, both this and The Fly, like, end very abruptly at the end. And,
The Fly has the perfect ending, whereas this, like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. There's something to be said for getting out, like, before there's even a chance for a denouement, really. Yeah. And, I don't know. I thought this movie had a lot of interesting things in it. It has some very exuberant, like, kind of low-budget filmmaking in it.
Oh, yeah. Like, I will defend the sound design until my dying days.
Yeah.
What is, like, Howard Shore is the...
Yeah, Howard Shore, who apparently, I guess, got in on the ground floor with Cronenberg, it seems like.
Yeah. And that's utterly marvelous.
Yeah.
Utterly marvelous. I think all hats off go to that. Like, some of the effects are... Some, like, it's obviously more low-budget than something like The Fly, but it's genuinely creepy and genuinely heart-pounding. That head
exploding is very well done.
The head exploding, like, at the end where they're controlling each other's minds.
Yeah. All that's, like, kind of, you're like, okay. Yeah.
and they're like, "What am I watching?" And
Yeah.
then like there's the computer exploding is
Yeah.
well done.
Oh, that's a great little
Yeah.
set piece. I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where he's scans into the computer. The way they explain scanning, I also think is really cool. Where they're like, it's
It
not just mind reading; it's like intertwining your nervous system with that of the person that you're scanning.
Yeah, and like do computers have a nervous system?
Yeah.
Goes in to like control the computer and so forth, and that is all fascinating.
Yeah, I like all that. So yeah, this movie I think is worth a watch. It's not really essential or anything, but it's a nice little
wouldn't-
capsule.
And even like apparently even Cronenberg fans don't consider this like one of his finest hours.
Oh really? I didn't know that.
Apparently so.
That's interesting.
But granted, it's still got quite a. I agree. I think it's still fascinating when it's about the scanners.
This guy's got a real sensibility, and it's good to see him like. I mean, this is probably one of his more interesting concepts. I mean, I assume it's a shame that the potential of it maybe wasn't quite fully realized. But
yeah, I guess so. There's also like more of like Cronenberg is just really fascinated about like how people react to his mutations.
right.
Like, it's all about like how like scanner like people are saying like I want the voices gone.
But yeah, that's another thing is that much more so than just like delving into the mechanics of it. This movie is
Yeah.
interested in seeing like how the scanners feel and how they react and how they live with these
How
abilities.
It tortures them. How
Yeah.
they gain power from it.
Yeah, and I do
It's
appreciate all that.
fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, this is the kind of thing I would love to see in more superhero movies, quite frankly.
Oh, I would too, but regardless, I guess Legion's about that.
Legion is kind of like that. I have a feeling that Noah Hawley likes Cronenberg quite a bit.
I wouldn't doubt that at all.
Yeah. Reed, I'm assuming you didn't watch this movie based on your silence. Okay.
No.
I don't know whether you'd be intrigued by it or bored by it, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's kind of there, but it's good.
It's good. I would never tell anyone not to watch it. I think it's got
no.
enough interesting things going for it. So yeah. So that's Scanners. And that is David Cronenberg week. So there we go. I mean, I expect that I'll come back to him at some point.
Yeah, these movies are fascinating.
Maybe I will like kind of scatter some extracurricular Cronenberg watching throughout the month. It is the month for it.
Yeah, Naked Lunch seems fascinating. I might look out for that.
Naked Lunch sounds interesting. My roommate Daniel saw that movie and hated it. So I'm very curious. I also am kind of curious about The Brood, which is another one of his kind of earlier ones.
Yeah, I guess like one thing I would look for going forward is like how the era he is working in impacts his filmmaking.
Yeah. The
Because
other
like both of these, like same director, but both of them are very much of an era.
right. And also like his kind of more modern stuff, I think sounds interesting as well. I almost watched his movie A History of Violence a few times and never actually did. But that's a movie that I might be interested in checking out at some point.
Interesting.
So
yeah, we're not done with you yet, Mr. Cronenberg.
Yep. So there you go, David Cronenberg. So next time
on Spooktober.
Yes. So I'm a little worried that if we dive right into the modern horror stuff, we might do 1 week of it and be like, this was a terrible idea, and then we'll be left with 2 extra weeks with nothing to do.
Yeah.
So I might, if you'd be willing to put that off for another week or so.
I would be perfectly willing to do that.
I thought maybe we could take a look at some more films by Mr. John Carpenter. Another kind of master of horror.
Sure, I would be willing to do that.
All right.
Are we going to watch The Thing?
Well, you've seen The Thing, but we haven't.
I've seen The Thing, and I really think you should watch it. That is an excellent movie.
Okay.
As far as the other assignment, I'll probably rewatch The Thing because it's been about a year since I saw it last.
Okay.
And I really want my roommates to see it. I may end up watching another movie just for extracurricular watching, but
Okay.
he's got a few different things. We could do Assault on Precinct 13, which was one of his kind of early 70s movies that people talk about a lot. There's Big Trouble in Little China, which I've wanted to watch for a really long time. Although that isn't really, I think,
Horror.
that isn't really a horror kind of thing.
When the fuck have we cared?
Yeah, that's true. There's They Live, which is another one that people kind of talk about frequently. What are we feeling here?
I kind of want to see Big Trouble in Little China.
Okay. So
I know that's kind of breaking the horror theme, but fuck it.
Fuck it. It's John Carpenter. Why not? All right.
Yeah.
It's only 99 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll do John Carpenter's The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China.
Hey, we're still doing a horror film.
A horror. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
That is
We're
right.
with Spooktober quite yet.
And we will get to those atrocious modern horror films soon.
We don't know that they're going to be atrocious.
Wait, by atrocious you mean... Wait, by atrocious you mean that there's a ghost haunts an Oktoberfest?
No. Well, what's going to happen is that we're going to be watching... We're watching Cronenberg, Carpenter. We're going to be watching, like, great classic horror films, and then we're going to watch them and, like, It Follows and go, oh, this is just underwhelming.
Perhaps. But, you know, I'm very curious about your next and The Invitation and...
We just need to catch up.
We need to catch up. All right.
We can't let modernity pass us by quite yet.
Yeah. All right. So, but first, before we get to all that, John Carpenter is coming your way. Be on the lookout. And, as always, thank you for joining us.
Be afraid.
Be afraid.
Very afraid.
Be very afraid.
Be very afraid, like me. Or not like me, because the diaper market's way too out of whack.
I'm glad we can end on that.
Goodbye.
That is...
Reed, your recording is trying to kill itself.
What?
Exactly.